Hello everyone, this is Pammy Jaiswal. Today, I am going to discuss on a very relevant topic which is not much discussed. So, we all know that corporate social responsibility provisions are in force. We know that there are significant amendments which have come under the CSR framework, pursuant to which the companies which qualify for doing CSR are mandatorily required to spend. Unlike the previous CSR framework where you had to either comply, that is, you were required to either spend or explain the reasons for not spending. Now it is very clear that companies which are covered under CSR are mandatorily required to spend the amount. There is no doubt about that. So we know that there are legal provisions about it. We know that there are certain requirements. You have to frame a policy. You need to set the budget. You know that you have to identify the activities, and then you have to spend and finally do the reporting and monitoring. We all are aware about this. But what is much more significant is that companies have, or rather, I put up this question that whether companies have only brought CSR into their framework or into their compliance mechanism as a tick box approach. They've only identified activities where they are simply providing the amount which is the minimum spending requirement and considering their compliance with the CSR framework. So technically where there is a legal compliance, but we need to also understand that what is the intent behind the CSR framework undergoing so many changes. So from the time when CSR provisions came into picture, that is in the year 2014, roughly around 1 crore 39 lakh rupees have been spent till 2022. So we need to understand that this whole lot of amount, the whole lot of money, resources are going in the name of CSR activities. And it is not that CSR activities are not taking place. It will be absolutely incorrect to say that companies are, all the companies are just putting CSR as a tick box approach. Not at all. There are several companies which are leading examples, and they have infabricated, they have taken CSR in their true spirit. So that is what we are going to talk about today. And today's topic is, it will bring out another aspect of CSR before all of us. So, need for strategic vision in CSR spending by companies. That's the topic for today. Now, friends, we understand that strategy, why do we need strategy when we are doing CSR? It's a corporate social responsibility. We are trying to be socially responsible when we are spending. But what do we actually mean when we say that you need to have a strategic vision when you're spending for CSR? We mean that companies should look at CSR as a part of a bigger business responsibility and business sustainability. Should not the companies create a CSR vision based on the company's business model, the business operations, the footprint that the company's activities are leaving behind in the society, in the environment? So that is what is needed. When we say that a strategic vision is needed for CSR spending, we are meaning to align the business model, the business objectives with those CSR activities which the companies think that they should choose, and choose strategically, calculatively, and of course with a lot of mindset going behind it, that this is the impact they want to create after putting an X amount of money towards CSR. So we know that the minimum obligation is there. And in fact, if you look at the statistics, we will see that from the time it came till now, till 2022, the gap between the prescribed and the actual spending actually got narrowed down, and it's a very good sign. In fact, now we also see instances, I mean, from quite long time now, maybe 2 years, 3 years down the line, we have been seeing that in fact companies are spending more than what they're required. So this is a good sign. But at the same time, when we look at the statistics, we find that there are certain popular activities which come up under CSR. And the most popular activities which you find is mostly related to healthcare, art and culture, education, rural development, eradicating poverty, hunger, malnutrition, etc. And if you look at the least popular activities, which are, you know, while these are activities also under Schedule 7, but we don't find many companies going behind these because of, let's say, the setup or the requirements, the resources, etc., which includes the socio-economic inequalities, setting up of orphanages, senior citizen welfare, agroforestry, special education, etc. So we are not saying this in just out of anywhere. We are saying this as per the source, the data source on the CSR websites of the government, where we find that during the years from the time it came, the activities which have taken their priorities are few, which have taken the focus, the limelight. In fact, during the COVID times, healthcare undisputedly had been the most spent activity under Schedule 7. So what are the gaps? What are the gaps under the current or the present day approach towards CSR? The tally approach. Now, what is the tally approach? So under the tally approach, the companies are simply adding it up. They're simply adding up the amount. X is the budget, and they are simply putting the X amount, debiting it to a beneficiary's account or an IA's account, and considering that their duty is done, their compliance is finished, irrespective of the fact that the activity where they've spent actually has no nexus with the business footprint which the company is making. Obliging to promoter commitments. Now, this is also a very, very common scenario where we find the local bodies, the request letters, the requisitions coming from the local bodies asking for certain amounts for certain social work, so certain health related camps, etc. In fact, there are certain other letters, formal, informal, which come to the promoters, and companies simply put that X amount, as a safe, they keep it, because there would be certain promoter commitments which they'll have to comply for the last moment. So there also they do not pay heed to the fact that the activities actually don't have a nexus or do not have a connection with what the company's footprints are on the business, on the society. The next is the tick box approach. A tick box approach, as is very evident, we are simply putting the money to the account of the beneficiary. We are not bothered whether the activity is actually taking place or not. We are not bothered that the impact which we intend to create is actually created or not. We are simply putting the money and forgetting about it and just putting that amount in our disclosures. So that is also not going to help us in fulfilling or meeting the CSR objectives in spirit. The last but not the least, one of the gaps is fulfilling marketing objectives. Now, you might say that companies cannot take up marketing objectives as a part of their CSR initiatives. That's true. But what happens is, I'll give you an example where a company intends to come out with, let's say, an ad on certain social awareness, where the expenses on the ad is such that let's say they engage any a celebrity or someone in that ad who charges a lump sum amount, and you also have other expenses on the awareness advertisement program, which is a very small proportion of the entire spending. So here, while the intent is noble, but what is actually happening? You end up putting a larger amount in paying to the celebrities for the awareness program, and the actual work, the actual change that you want is nowhere to be seen. So it's better to, I mean, rather I put the question to you all, is it better to only talk about a change, or rather create that initiative, bring that initiative, do that initiative to create that change? Of course, the efforts that go into the latter is much more, but anytime, I mean, in our view, it's better to take the initiative rather than just talk about it. If I say plant trees, and I only keep on saying plant trees without actually planting one, the better is any day planting the trees rather than just singing the slogan of planting trees. So it's as simple as you have to be the change if you talk about the change. So what is needed? What is needed to cure this or streamline this current gaps under the CSR framework? If we talk about the vision-oriented CSR approach, we need to understand that every business that is being operated in our country, each of them has a particular business model. Each of them uses certain resources, whether it is human resources, the natural resources, the engagement of the society in some way or the other. So there is surely a resource which goes into the business operations. And any day, it is very, very obvious that every business that operates will have some or the other footprint, some or the other impact on the environment, on the society, in some form or the other. If that impact is negative, whether it's in the form of depleting the natural resources, using the natural resources, using the human resources, and in doing that, if it creates a negative impact, that's a very important step for you to identify. And of course, if there are negative footprints, that is where the companies need to understand that if their operations are creating negative footprints, they are the ones who are going to take the initiative to undo that change, undo that negative impact. If not undo, then at least take steps to reduce the negative impact. Again, if I talk about the vision-oriented approach, what we need to do? To be very simple, we need to take a close look at the business model. We need to identify what all resources are being used in our business model, starting from the base level, starting from the factories, then your offices, your corporate offices, your branches, everywhere. You have to identify the impact and, of course, any negative impact that is being created from the business activities. Once you have identified that, you need to prioritize the CSR activity based on the business model and the footprint that the business activity is creating. So we all know that there is a Schedule 7 under the Companies Act, and it contains a long list of activities which are the eligible CSR activities. So, and they are all very, very wide. They have to be read, they have to be interpreted very liberally. So it's a long list, and it will hardly be a case where a company does not find a remedy or an activity which caters to the negative footprints that its activities are creating. Once you prioritize those CSR activities, you start working on those. You start spending on those activities. And of course, only spending without any review, without any monitoring would be like, simply giving exams and not getting the result. So you need to know, how is this entire thing moving? How is this actually making up to the vision-oriented approach where the companies can actually see the results, they can see the difference. So if I give you certain examples, for example, a company engaged in a mining activity it obviously uses a lot of natural resources. There's a lot of depletion of natural resource that is happening. So in any manner, if it can, resurrect, if it can regenerate the environmental degradation, it can take up environmental projects, it can take up livelihood enhancement projects, which surely has a close nexus with the activity of a mining business. Then if we talk about, let's say, the cement industry, it creates a lot of carbon, right? So again, talking about the environmental projects and programs, talking about the livelihood enhancement projects, talking about afforestation, green cover is something where, I mean, these activities surely have a connection with the footprints of the cement industry. We can talk about, let's say, one or two more activities. For example, a plastic manufacturing industry. Again, environmental projects must. And then last but not the least, if we talk about manufacturing sector in general, then of course there are local body engagements which are there, the mass engagements. So there they need to come out with, let's say, educational projects, health projects, vocational training, in addition to the environmental projects, because we need to understand that the entire CSR concept cannot be narrowed down to a tick box approach or narrowed down to a tally approach. It is a part of a bigger initiative which the business houses are expected to attain, that is business sustainability, business responsibility. And therefore, having a vision-oriented CSR approach is a must. In fact, in one of the recent national body meetings, the policymakers also started up talking about this aspect of CSR, and it will not be surprising if tomorrow this particular vision-oriented CSR approach becomes a part of the law itself. So it will always be better to be ready, to at least know what this concept is, and that also prepares all of us to take steps in this direction. Thank you so much for listening to me, and bye.